Alright, so we got some Natlan characters coming up, 3 to be exact. In this video, we're going to be talking about the new 5-star Hydro Catalyst user who rides a shark and actually has a pretty unique and interesting kit that looks pretty damn strong. And she's going to synergize with vape comps very well and scale off HP, so she's going to be insanely tanky. Plus, her ascension stat is crit rate, so having crit damage investment along with HP is going to be deadly. And because we're getting the Pyro Archon and some other Pyro characters, it's pretty cool that she's going to synergize insanely well with Vape. Not to say that you can't use her with other reactions, but she's going to specialize with Vape, based off of her percentages, her durations, and all of that. So let's go over her kit in simple terms. I'm not going to be over-analyzing her numbers and crunching them because her kit's going to change a lot. She's very early beta, but let's break down what she actually does, the meat and potatoes, and then we're going to go over some different builds and possible team comps. Obviously, we're going to be getting a ton of new weapons and artifacts. One of those new artifact sets will be geared towards her and her kit specifically, but there are definitely weapons and artifacts you can put on her right now that'll be very good in the meantime while you're farming for those. Or maybe you just don't feel like farming for artifacts anytime soon. So don't worry, there's going to be some options you can build her, as well as different team comps. So let's break down her kit first and foremost. Like I said, she scales off HP, so she's going to be insanely tanky. No need to really coddle her when it comes to sustaining. Her normal attacks are pretty basic. It kind of reminds me of Kokomi. She just throws 3 puffer fish that have area of effect hydro damage, and with her charge attack she whips out her shark and she uses it like a baseball bat. I'm going to cover her burst second because her skill is where it gets complicated. Her burst is also pretty straightforward. She takes her shark and launches it like a torpedo. Basically, it's a giant nuke of area of effect hydro damage. It costs only 60 energy, which isn't a lot, but the cooldown is 15 seconds, so you're not going to be spamming this by any means. But what I found most interesting, and I hope this doesn't change, is at level 10, her burst damage is 75% of her max HP, and because she scales off HP, that's actually looking pretty nuts. And that's essentially it for her burst and her main attacks, but her skill is where it all gets complicated. There's a new mechanic in Natlan called the Night Soul mechanic, and all characters will have some kind of gimmick that helps them traverse the land, but gives them a special perk when they're in their homeland, kinda like how Fontaine characters can dive out of the water, but other characters can't. These Night Soul points are what allow her to surf on her shark for its duration. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't actually run on stamina, or it doesn't have a time limit, but it's these Night Soul points that allow you to surf for longer. And there's a bunch of different stipulations throughout her kit that actually make this last longer. Now, for her actual skill, she's gonna hop on her shark and surf around. This shark will take bites of enemies that scale off her HP, but this damage is actually regular attack damage, so you're gonna have to level up your regular attack talent, not just your skill talent. Only now, instead of throwing those puffer fishes, you're riding on a shark taking bites of enemies that are scaling off your HP but way more powerful. And her damage is looking not too freaking shabby right now. The shark will only bite every 2 seconds, which is very good for vape comps like we just talked about. You can also just simply bump or run over enemies that will add bonus buffs, an extra area of effect hydro damage up to 5 times while you're surfing. She will gain 60 Night Soul points immediately when she goes into her skill state while she's riding the shark, and she'll constantly consume these points. However, you can regain these points doing various things. For example, there's certain areas in Natlan where you can keep your skill stance going and keep your Night Soul blessing even if you've depleted all your points. Her duration is decreased by 25% while you're in Natlan, by 65% if you're outside of Natlan like I said, so it's less depletion in Natlan, by 45%, which is quite a bit. When you actually bite an opponent in one of her other passives, she generates a floaty fish nearby, and this will restore 25 of your Night Soul points. But only one of these fish can appear every time you use her skill, otherwise you could probably continuously do it forever. And because you already have 60 points, adding an additional 25 is not too shabby. You'll definitely be able to do this every time, seeing as that you're going to be biting a lot of opponents. For her other passive, when a nearby party member triggers a Night Soul burst, she'll gain 1 stack, max 3 stacks, And then when she uses her burst, that already has really high damage scaling off HP, which is a nuke, the damage will increase by either 20, 30, or 40% of her max HP depending on the stacks you have. Obviously, other Natlan characters are going to have this Night Soul gimmick, or mechanic. So this extra passive is going to do insanely well with other Pyro characters or even other characters in general from Natlan. Her C1 is a bit sad and tragic because her consumption of the Night Soul Blessing, which is her skill that allows you to ride around on a shark, is decreased by 70%. That's a huge percentage of decretion while not in combat. So in other words, her exploration gimmick, riding the shark, will be insane with C1 unlocked if you're not in combat. Which I actually think is sort of bullshit because they shouldn't be locking an exploration mechanic behind a constellation. But because Natlan's going to be very exploration focused, I can see the money grab here. But because people will be pulling for her because she's a new Natlan character, it's a new region, exploration's a big draw for this region, and people will honestly pull for her just because she can ride a shark. They're trying to bait you into spending more money by somewhat locking her exploration behind C1. Her C2 just essentially gives you 2 free stacks when you enter her skill to add more damage. Her C3 just increases her skill talent level by 3. Her C4 just gives you 7 extra energy when you obtain that floater fish. Through her passive, when you bite an enemy, you can do that once per duration. We talked about that. It increases your night points. Her C4 just does that, gives you extra energy, but also increases your burst damage by 200%. That's at C4. Her C5 just increases her burst talent level by 3. And her C6 finally just has her basically all her damage, like her Sharky Bite, passive missiles that get sent, dealing area of effect hydro damage when you run them over and they get those stacks. Both the crit rate and crit damage is increased by 5% and 10% respectively. Now, clearly right off the bat, she's going to synergize well with Vape. I don't see why you couldn't use her with some freeze comps, some different Dendro combinations like Hyper Bloom or Burgeon. Kinda gotta wait and see different team comps in action. Or even like a mono Hydro team would probably be pretty strong as well, but one thing I can say about her kit is she's going to want to be on the field most of the time because her duration while surfing and dealing regular attacks. So she's going to be somebody you want on the field and be a main damage dealer that scales off HP. So she's going to be pretty bulky, which means building her shouldn't be too hard, and you shouldn't have to coddle her with healing or defense. Now for artifacts you could farm right now, right off the bat, the one that looks the most promising to me is the Hydro set, Heart of Depth, because the 2-piece set gives you hydro damage bonus, but the 4-piece set actually increases your normal and charge attacks by 30% for 15 seconds after using her skill, which is very much similar to how her kit actually works with the shark and its bite attacks, so this could be decent. You could also easily use this with a 2-piece of another kind, like an HP set for example, like the Millilith set that gives you a 20% HP buff and she scales completely off HP, so having a 2-piece Hydro, 2-piece HP would work really well. There are multiple sets that have HP investment in the 2-piece set. She is an on-field damage dealer for the most part. You could even double up on the 2-piece HP sets to get 40% HP, so focusing on actually distributing your stats a little bit more evenly would be beneficial in my eyes. Again, she's going to get her own signature artifact set, but these are just a few options that you can run right now. For your Goblet or Cup, go for Hydro damage bonus. If you don't have that, HP. And for your Circlet piece, I'd go with crit damage because her Ascension stat is crit rate, so she'll be lacking crit damage. I already have a good Heart of Depth crit damage circlet already, so I'll probably try this out on her. And for the timepiece, HP. As for her weapon, I actually don't have any 5-star catalysts, but I do have a few decent 4-star ones. The Prototype Amber with its HP substat would be decent. You could even use Thrilling Tales the Dragon Slayers because it has a pretty decent HP percentage and the lack of base attack doesn't matter. This one also is easy to refine at 5, and if you're pairing her with Kinich, for example, who actually benefits from having insane attack percentage, this might be a good one to put with her. The Widsith is also another really good 4-star option because that is a pretty decent crit damage substat. You could also go with the Solar Pearl. If you have enough crit damage investment in your artifacts and your substats for your artifacts, then maybe adding a little bit extra crit rate couldn't hurt. This one also increases your normal, charge, and burst damage. This is just meant to give you a basis. I'm sure there's a lot of weapons you guys have that I don't. Maybe you have some good 5-star catalyst weapons with crit damage substats or crit rate. by all means try those out. These are just some ideas. As for team comps, you're going to want to try to focus on Vape. Again, Natlan characters are going to work really well with other Natlan characters, and most of them synergize well with Pyro, being the Pyro Nation, the Pyro Archons coming out. This was similar with Fontaine and Farina. HP loss was a gimmick for a while. Right off the top of my head, something like this with Kazuha, Dia. Dia has a lot of off-field Pyro damage that she can summon pretty frequently, and Mona gives nice buffs as well. Because she's going to take most of the field time, you're going to want to try to put her with teammates that don't require a lot of field time as well. So any variation of Vape, even some Burgeon would be really nice as well. Add Nahida or Baiju for some defense and extra Dendro. Zhangling, she's not going to really need a healer because she has high HP, but Toma would be good as well. Some variation where you could actually add Farina and Jean to get extra buffs from Farina while still causing Vape and being the main on-field character. Farina's HP depletion won't hurt her that much because she scales off HP. It's not to say that she won't be decent on maybe like a freeze comp team as well, or maybe even a mono hydro, which is a team that I personally like to use a lot. But from what I can see, she doesn't have an insane amount of hydro application, so she's definitely going to be optimal in pyro related reactions. Also, Hyper Bloom won't be terrible either. Again, I just don't know how much she's going to proc Hyper Bloom, being that Hydro is a pretty important element when trying to cause these reactions related with Dendro. A team that I'm excited to try her with is something like this, where you have 3 characters that do off-field damage, and then you can throw her on and proc as much as you need to. And that's going to be my general basis of this new character, Mualani. Her numbers do look pretty insane on paper right now, so don't get discouraged if they nerf her a bit, it's very likely. But she does look like a lot of fun. Her kit is a little bit odd. Once we actually see it in action more and see it with different team comps and get to test it ourselves, we'll know for sure, and that'll give you a better generalization of how to actually approach this character. Don't panic about weapons and artifacts right now. You're going to have lots of time to farm her signature set if you're somebody that really wants her, but if you're somebody that's on the fence, I do not think in any way, shape, or form she's a must-pull character. She looks a lot of fun, she'll be definitely good, but if you prefer to have a more universal or versatile character, then maybe she's not the one for you. With that said, I hope this was helpful, hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.